What's up everyone, I'm BusyLess and welcome to the world of music production, sound design, Ableton Live and all things related. Finally, we've been waiting for this for a long time, and guys from Ableton did something they never did before. They have just released a new synth called Drift. And it's great. And do you want to hear the best part? Drift is now included for free in all versions of Ableton Live, so even if you're using Ableton Live Intro or Standard, you have access to this powerful new synth. And that makes Drift the most significant addition to the Ableton Live family in years. And it also means that you'll probably be using it quite often. So, in this video we'll take a deep dive into Drift and I'll show you everything you need to know to start making amazing sounds. And of course, feel free to come back to this tutorial anytime you want to discover more about the synth or simply to make sure you know everything about it. And if you stick around till the end of this video, I'll even give you some free presets that you can use in your own music. Did I already mention they're free? They're free. So let's talk a quick moment about what the Drift synthesizer actually is. So Drift is a subtractive type of synth that resembles an analog synthesizer and is meant to be easy and fun for everybody. It also has some built-in basic FM synthesis. The whole idea of Drift comes from a real analog synthesizer in which the pitch of an oscillator can change slightly due to factors like temperature, age, or electrical interference. This can create a subtle organic variation in the sound that can add depth and character to a patch. By simulating oscillator drift, Ableton's Drift synth can add a touch of randomness, really cool flow and character to the sound, making it more natural and interesting. And that's what that magical drift dial is for. We can now decide how much of that feeling we want to introduce in our patch. Okay, so let's jump into the drift and cover some basics first. Okay, so how does the drift look like? Let's tidy up here and I'll show you everything. So this is the Drift. So we have a paper version today to work on, but no worries, we're gonna get to the actual sound making device in just a moment. I just wanted to show you little things, how things are organized inside Drift. So we have a couple of sections here, and I'm gonna cut this section actually, so you can see them much better and easier. Okay, we have all these bits and pieces. So we have our oscillators, we have our filter, we have some envelopes, and we have some LFOs and modulators. These are just tabs. And then we have our amp and the output section. So how this thing is organized. So we have our oscillators. So 1, 2 oscillators, noise oscillator, and they will normally go to the filter. Or you can bypass the filter like that, just skipping the filter. Then from envelopes you can of course go to the LFO and to the amp, but envelopes and LFO, they can modulate some of the parameters. Some of the things will go from envelope 1 back to the filter or back to the pitch modulation, or the same with LFO, that can go to the filter, or that could go also to pitch modulation. And there's so many configurations that you can design your perfect sound. Okay, now so let's launch the actual Drift synthesizer and let's talk a little bit about how does it sound and how to produce a sound, and let's talk in depth about the elements inside Drift. Okay, we need our keyboard. Okay, we will need headphones to be able to precisely hear the sound we're making. This is the first thing you see after opening a Drift. So there we are. So as I mentioned before, this is the oscillator section. There's a filter, envelopes, LFOs, modulators, and amp. So basically all the parameters that you can assign to the sound and amplify it or transpose it or use some velocity. So let's talk about each element at the beginning and then we will start making some sounds. We have 3 oscillators. So this is the oscillator 1, which can have 7 different waveforms, and oscillator 2 can have only 5. You can change the octave down or up, -2, +3, and then you have a little shape. So this is like a wave folding, and the cool thing about it is you can see the waveform that it gets produced just here. So let's switch off the oscillator number 2 for the moment, just to see. We have the sawtooth wave, and we can modify a shape by twisting this. And let's listen to this first. This is cool. Okay, then of course octaves. That's simple. And then of course this is the oscillator one, gain. So how low in volume or how high in volume we want to push it through. Then the oscillator 2 we can switch on and off here. The same with the noise. And these 3 arrows are for sending them to filter. So if we have these on, this thing will go through the filter like so. Let's show you in that example. We can operate the filter, but if we turn that off, the filter doesn't work because the sound goes straight to amps. So let's leave it back on. Let's turn on the oscillator 2. We can change the waveform and it will show it on the display here. So if we have a different one, we can change the octave. Okay, that sounds interesting already. And then there is a noise oscillator, which just kind of generates noise, basically. So louder or more silent, that can go through the filter as well, or you can skip the filter. And then we also have this little modulation, so we can modulate the pitch with whatever you want, basically. So envelopes or LFOs, or with keys, or velocity. And if you have the MP enabled keyboard, then you can have some pressure and slide here as well, which is very handy if you want to do some vibrato or bending the notes with your MP keyboard. Really nice. Also with another parameters, you can use 2 parameters to modulate your pitch, which is perfect. Then we have a filter, and filter has 2 types. Type 1, which is 12 decibels per octave, so the slope is slightly delicate like we see here, but it's also 24 decibels per octave with a little bit higher resonance and a much steeper slope, so it's gonna cut all the higher frequencies very aggressively, but with a nice resonance to it. Then we also have a high-pass filter, which is only one high-pass filter without any resonance that we can add to it. Okay, cool. Simple as that. What we also have is that key parameter, so which means that for the lower notes, we're going to have lower frequencies. For the higher notes, it's going to open the filter a little bit more. And also, we have these modulations, or frequency modulation of this main knob of the frequency can be modulated with some other parameters, the same as in the pitch modulation, which could be envelopes, LFO, then key. According to which key you press, you can multiply that effect seen here, or also velocity and mod wheel, and then so MP parameters like pressure and slide. And we have another modulation source that we can use for the same purpose. And now we have our envelopes, and envelopes are essential, of course, in the synth. And we have 2 envelopes, number 1, number 2. And the first envelope, envelope number 1, is a amp envelope. So we have our slope, attack, decay, sustain, release, just the standard stuff, and we can modify that, or we can use the graph. So we can open the sound a little bit slower. We can lower the sustain. We can make the decay faster, depending on what sound we are actually making. Then release, we can make it longer release. So once we release the key on a keyboard, it's gonna sound a little bit longer. Now, we also have a second envelope, and we can also do the same basically, but then the second envelope is actually only used with the modulation. So we can use this modulation and assign the envelope to the frequency modulation. So we can do all sorts of funny stuff with it. And then we can also use an LFO at the end. So we have a regular rate of LFO. We have 4 different types of LFO here, which can be synchronized with Hertz. So we see the Hertz value, and that goes from 0.17 to 1.7 kilohertz. But we need to assign it to some kind of parameter. Let's go with the LFO here. Interesting. Up to the audible range of 1.7 kilohertz, really nice. Then we also have milliseconds, so we can synchronize it to the time. We can also have the note, which we can synchronize to the note, like 1/8 or 1/16. We can synchronize it to the tempo of the song. Then there is the amount. We can of course lower the amount of the LFO. And we can use a modulation like envelope 2 or basically anything else as you've seen before, just to modulate the amount of an LFO. And then we have another tab, which is mods. It's like a mod matrix. So we have our modulation source, which could be envelope 1, envelope 2, LFO, key, and all the things that I mentioned before. And these parameters can modify quite a lot of parameters. So we have oscillator 1 gain and shape. We have oscillator 2 gain and detune. We have noise gain. We have some frequencies on the filter, and we have some LFO rate and cycle envelope rate. Now, this is the most important part of this drift synthesizer, and this is that drift dial. So what that does, that emulates the actual sound of the old vintage analog synthesizers by adding that little drift to the waveform. So now when you go to 0, the sound is very static. But when you push the drift dial forward, let's listen to what happens now. It slightly drifts in pitch and volume, which makes that really nice analog sound. Okay, perfect. And we also have some modes. If you want to do a mono sound, we can do a mono sound. And we can apply amount of sub-oscillators to it, making the sound really thick. And we can choose how many voices do we want to use. And then we also have legato, glide, just the standard stuff that every synthesizer has. Then velocity to volume, and then transpose, note pitch bend, that's for MP, and the pitch bend range. Okay, now, but there is also a very interesting mode that I didn't mention before of the envelope number 2, which can be a cycling envelope. So kind of an LFO, and then we can of course choose a tilt, and we can choose the hold of the waveform. We can of course modify most of the parameters inside the drift, so all the oscillators and fillers, and even we can modify an LFO with envelope, an envelope with LFO, and then we also have a rate. But the very interesting thing is that cycling envelope time mode. So if we would, let's say, assign the envelope 2 to a pitch modulation, let's add a little bit like 15%. And if we play with the ratio slider, let's listen to it now. Pretty cool. We can also do that with a filter, but let's use an LFO to do that. We can use similar stuff with the LFO. Let's play with the amount, and then we have different waves. We can have a square wave here, and let's, maybe not square, will be pretty much aggressive, so let's go with a saw up, and then full amount, and let's apply this to a filter. So let's listen to it now. So pretty interesting stuff. Okay, we've talked about how everything looks like in Drift. Now it's finally time to make some actual sounds. So let's open a new instance of Drift. First, so let's design some resonant keys, some long resonant keys that are really nice in all the synth pop and all the electronic music. Let's look into the envelopes. Let's give a little bit of attack, but not too long. Okay, that's fine. Let's make it a little bit plucky, so let's shorten the decay and lower the sustain. And let's make the release a little bit longer. Not that much, maybe. Okay, that's cool. I like it so far. Now, let's design a filter. So let's start with filter and envelopes. Let's make it sharper. Okay, that's fine. Let's up the resonance. High pass filter a little bit. And we can use an envelope to operate the filter. I'm actually pretty happy with what's happening with the synthesizer. I wouldn't change much, but let's have a look on the other options. So we have this waveform. That's really nice. We had this one already. This is cool for like all the bass sounds. And we have the second oscillator, which can be like this one, or let's detune it a little bit. Already much softer and nicer. But okay, let's leave it to the default. Let's use oscillator 2 as a sub oscillator, and then oscillator first, we're gonna leave it on a sawtooth wave. Okay, I'm happy with this sound for now. Noise, we can add a little bit of noise. Now let's send it through the filter in general to add like a little noise floor. Okay, now we have this set up, we have envelopes. Let's use envelope 2 to modify our filter. So we're gonna have that little spike, have a slower decay. Let's add it so we can hear what we're doing. Let's change that to envelope 2, and let's go to the positive values now. Okay. Okay, sounds fine to me. Now LFO, let's use LFO to just to modify a pitch. But let's first add that drift element, so let's see how does it sound like now. Okay, just a tiny bit, so it's nice and interesting. And then let's add a really slow LFO. I'm a really big fan of really slow LFOs. And let's add this to pitch modulation. So let's listen to it now. That's obviously way too much. So let's go tiny bit. You can also use envelope 2 to do the same. Let's go. We want a tiny bit of that LFO. You can use LFO to play with the filter as well. Maybe the other way around. Okay, cool. Like it so far. Then we have the poly mode. What does that do? We have the mono for making mostly bass sound, which can play only one sound at a time. But we have this stereo mode, which is really cool. That's gonna widen the sound as soon as we're gonna move that dial. But we also have a unison mode. And that's gonna just detune the unison. So I never want to go more than like 15-20% of unison detune. Okay, cool. Now we have that drift already set up. There's the volume. We can play with the volume just to match our volume gain on the channel. Then transpose, we will not be transposing it too much. So basically that's the sound done. Let's add a little bit of reverb. So let's find a reverb. Let's make the room slightly smaller, decay slightly smaller. And let's add a little bit of a ping pong delay before the reverb. So basic stuff. Let's try how it sounds. Oh, way too much. Too much. Okay, that's the first sound design. Now we're gonna make a bass sound. Let's add another drift. If you're wondering where the drift is, it is in Instruments and Drift, just here. It also has some presets built in, so you can try these. And as I mentioned at the end, I'm gonna give you a link to 5 of my presets that I've created myself. Okay, let's go and let's open the drift now. So let's design a bass now. So let's start with the oscillators first. We will make a first oscillator, this wave shape. We're gonna change the shape a little bit, like 0.5. So it has a little kick in it. Then oscillator 2 will be a sine wave at a octave -1 and slightly detuned, like so. We will not need a noise oscillator. It's absolutely fine. Let's leave it like that. Then let's go to the filters. If it's a bass, let's go to like lower registers. So we can also play with a gain of oscillators, which is one thing that I wanted to leave for a little bit later, because as you can see, the filter doesn't have any drive options, so we can't drive the filter to get that overdriven or distorted sound, adding harmonics, but we can actually do that by using the oscillator gain. So if we push that a little bit further, let's listen to how it sounds like if we pull back a little bit. And if you push it too hard, it starts to overdrive or overpower the filter, so it gets overdriven. So that's the way how we can very precisely determine how much of the drive you want on the filter. Okay, we can go up with the resonance a little bit. Let's change the type of filter to 24 decibels per octave. And let's introduce some of the high pass filter. And now we hear that little click at the beginning of the sound. So let's go to the ADSR section of the first envelope. So let's use like 5 milliseconds. So you got rid of that little click at the beginning. Shorten the decay a little bit. Make the bass a little bit more plucky with a shorter release. Okay, and now the envelope number 2 will modify our frequency. So let's go, how many, let's say like 10% for now. 11 is fine. And then we can change the attack a little bit, so it's kind of slower. Bring the decay up to around 4 seconds. Okay, so that is nicely done. And then LFO 04 as it is now with hertz, and then the same sine wave will be fine. And we can modulate also a filter a little bit. So let's add a little bit here. So the sound is kind of boring a little bit, so let's go to the mode, and as we're designing a bass, we can use a mono. And let's add the sub oscillators. That makes it so much better. And that's even before any effects. Okay, let's add the drift a little bit. So that's basically how we design a bass sound. But let's play a little bit with the cycling envelope. So we have this envelope already assigned to the frequency modulation. So let's change that a little bit and synchronize it to a note. So let's choose 1/16. And we're gonna add a little bit of the hold and listen to it now. Interesting, we can synchronize it to 1/8. But what I've also noticed, we haven't even touched our mod wheel. So let's design our mod wheel. So if we want to do that, one of the best ways will be to go to the mod section, and then we can, for example, see. So mod wheel as it is here will operate our high pass frequency. Let's listen to what does that change. That goes a little bit too hard. So what I recommend is to push your mod wheel to the highest value, and then let's lower the value here. You can leave it like that. So we have this amount of modulation. And then we can also apply a mod wheel to this synchronization cycle synchronization. So second envelope rate, and we want to apply a little bit more, around 60%. Let's be precise, 64. And then let's listen to what changes now. That goes fluently regardless of the note, so it's just very cool. We go to 1/16 here now. So we have our pulsating bass with modulations and with everything we needed. So that's basically how we create a bass sound inside the drift. So as you can see, the drift is very versatile and you can use it to produce loads of sound. And of course, for sure, I didn't say everything what drift has to offer, but these are the basics that will get you through the learning curve and to start making your own sounds and basically enjoy making sounds, because it's really cool and simple and really easy. It sounds pretty well too. Ooh, okay, I hope that wasn't too much knowledge packed in one video, and if you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about drift and other synthesizers and Ableton Live in general, be sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notifications so you'll never miss a video. Now, as I promised at the beginning of this video, I want to share with you 5 different presets for free for drift. Simply follow the link in the description box down below and all the instructions are there. And if you want to get creative with some other awesome sounds, you want to watch this video next, in which I make a super cool evolving cinematic patch using Ableton's wavetable. And I'm here to help, so if you have any questions, leave them in the comment box down below. Okay, thanks so much for watching and see you guys in the next video. Cheers!